Hey everyone, welcome back. This is our third presentation on our first day of the Caring Conference, Our Resilient Spirit. And I'm happy to introduce you to Kathy, who's going to help us find our flow. So Kathy, take it away.
Thank you, Denise, and thank you, Denise and Carlos, for your wonderful presentations and for actually creating a flow into mine, which is about enhancing resilience through flow. So first, let me introduce myself. I was a part-time caregiver for my mother who had dementia and a respite caregiver for a friend who had motor neuron disease. And I've lost several people in my life, and I am a caregiving consultant and involved in that aspect of things, and I'm also a grief support specialist. And I also have a day job, but that's a whole other story. So first, I'd like to pose a question. I'd like to know if you've ever been so immersed in an activity that you lost track of time, forgot where you were challenged but not frustrated, had a great time, and enjoyed it so much that you felt refreshed afterward. So if you could take a minute and just write in the chat, what were you doing if you have experienced this, and what were you doing when you experienced this? And as I explained to Denise, I'm a little challenged with seeing the chat, so any responses would be happily received.
Yep, and I'll read them out to you. And I think it's interesting. I like that third bullet item, which is challenged but not frustrated, which I think is a very important differentiator. And Jody is writing in the chat room, horseback riding.
That's excellent, Jody. What a wonderful thing to do.
And we have another one, and that is hiking.
Hiking, great. Great. So I hope people will share more, but let me just say, and Denise, please stop me and read them as you get them if you would, but I just want to let you know, in case you're wondering, what is this flow thing she's talking about? That's what flow is.
And I want to add that Bruce has added hiking and dates with his wife. And Felicia is sharing that she likes to sit on the beach in Mexico, which sounds amazing right now.
Let's go.
Deb is riding a roller coaster, which I think is interesting. Wow.
Whoa,
that is flow. Wow.
Flow. And that is challenging.
Yes, and what a great sense of adventure. And Margaret is adding sitting by the pool with family. I love the combinations of these examples, which are both peaceful, adventuresome, active, and yet relaxing.
They're so great. And the interesting thing, which we'll get to later about flow, is that in doing research for this presentation, I discovered that actually people think there's a lot of applications of flow that I hadn't even thought about. So I'm really interested in sharing that.
And I've got two more for you. So
Please.
Felicia is adding that she feels in the flow when she goes to the mall shopping. Oh, I love that. And Julia is sharing when she volunteers her time to help her son's scout troop. That's awesome too.
Great. Those are great examples. I really, as you said, Denise, I love the range of ideas. That's really great. Okay, so let's talk about flow. So who decided that what we just talked about was flow? So flow was first identified by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi in 1975. He grew up in Europe during World War II, and he was noticing that in the oppressive environment in which he was living, he was born in Italy and grew up in Hungary, that there were people who were obviously unable to deal with the incredible stress of daily life, but some people were thriving. Even though it was an oppressive environment, even though their travel was restricted and there were food shortages and everything. But he observed that those who were able to thrive were engaged in activities that they enjoyed, like carving, drawing, things like that. So he eventually traveled through Europe and ended up coming to the United States to study at the University of Chicago. And he focused his career on exploring this question, not only in the context of resilience under stress, but also as it relates to creativity and happiness. Today, he's known as the father of positive psychology and the person who first identified flow. So what is flow? Csikszentmihalyi, and I'm really pleased that I'm able to pronounce his name, so thank you for letting me do that. He defines flow as a state in which you are so involved in an activity that nothing else seems to matter. The experience itself is so enjoyable that you do it for the sheer sake of doing it, Consciousness is harmoniously ordered. Your attention is singularly focused like a laser beam. And I really love that this sort of is piggybacking on what Carlos was talking about being present in the moment. Because when you're in flow, all you're thinking about really is what's happening in that moment. So who experiences flow? Well, from our survey, we can tell that we all do in some way or another. Sometimes it's associated with high performance athletes. Like you will watch Olympic skiers or skaters and go, oh yeah, they're in flow. They're not thinking about what they're having for dinner. They're just thinking about that routine and that next move and how to get, how to do whatever it is they do when they're skiing that keeps them upright. Children who are learning new skills experience flow. I work at a Montessori school, and one of the things that really is emphasized here is setting up the environment so students can choose their own work once they have a lesson and how to do it. And you will see children sitting and working on things by themselves, even, or with someone else, for long periods of time, for an hour even, because they're getting so much positive feedback from that experience. Artists, writers, and musicians experience flow. And this is how I first became introduced to flow, was having so many musician friends who would say things like, I can't pick up a guitar because if I pick up a guitar, I can't put it down until I finish writing a song, or till I work through that chord change, or how that's going to go in the song. So clearly they were, so engaged in it that they lost track of time and couldn't even think about anything else till they finished that task. But anyone at any stage of their life can experience flow, on a beach, on a roller coaster, on a horse. So Csikszentmihalyi identified 8 elements of a flow experience, which are a clear goal, so you know what it is that you want to accomplish; feedback, which could even be your own personal feedback, like, really excited, I'm doing this really well, I'm really enjoying this. The challenges match the skills. Again, you're not entering the point of frustration, but you're just a little bit challenged. You're not doing something that's so easy for you that you don't have to think about it. Concentration, you're just really involved and focused and concentrated on what you're doing at that moment. Control, you have control over the activity. There's a loss of self-consciousness. You're not worried about being reviewed when you're in flow. You're just doing it, and you're doing it for the sake of doing it. And there's a transformation of time, which means that you basically aren't thinking about how much time has passed while you're doing it. You might suddenly look up and go, oh, I missed lunch. I was so engaged in that experience. And this list is from a book of Csikszentmihalyi's called Living with Flow, which, by the way, I highly recommend. It's available as an audiobook. It's about 5 hours long. It comes with a workbook, and I found it to be really one of his easiest to access works. So recently, I saw this video, maybe some of you have seen it on YouTube, and the minute I saw it, I thought, oh, I want it as part of this presentation. So I'm going to show you this video, and I just want you to think about what you're seeing here and how it relates to those elements. Keep your fingers crossed. I haven't done this before. So she's weighing penguins at the St. Louis Zoo.
Very good. Thank you. That was very helpful. Good job, Terry. Good girl. She's 4.2. Good job, Pumpkin. Good job. Very good. Do you your sister do that, please? Can you sit down? Good.
If I can figure out how to get back to my screen, we will be all set. So what did you see there? Did you see, like I saw? I mean, this is what I saw, but tell me what you saw if you'd like. But was there a clear goal? To me, there was a clear goal. She was weighing the penguins. Bless her heart. Was she getting feedback? I think she knew if she was successful at weighing the penguins. Did the challenges match her skills? What do you think? She seemed like she was up to the challenge. She seemed to know how to manage those penguins. Was she concentrating? I don't think she was thinking about, her grocery list or her plans for that evening. I think she was thinking about getting those penguins on the scale. Was she focused? You notice she barely looked up at the other person in the room. Was she concentrating? I think she had to be. Did she have control over those penguins? Over the experience? From someone who works in a building with a preschool, I'm actually really admiring the way she's handling those penguins. I don't think she was self-conscious. I don't think she was worried about how much time was passing, but I did notice that she was very efficiently writing down the weight, keeping track of the penguins, giving them a reward. And I looked at that when I first saw it and I went, that's flow right there. So
And Kathy, if I could just add, it seems like the penguins had a flow too.
it does, doesn't it? So what did you observe there, Denise, about the penguins and their flow?
Well, they all gathered. Once one was successful, the rest of them went to be in that group, and they all were focused on being together and stepping on the scale and getting their treat.
A really good observation. I think that you're right that the penguins were in flow. So thank you for indulging me that video. I just love the penguins. So what are the benefits of experiencing flow? Like why does it matter if we're in flow or not? Well, one thing about flow is you experience active and intense engagement. You're doing something. You have moments of joy. Or Csikszentmihalyi would say that if you are able to maximize your flow experiences, you will have a pattern of happiness in your life. Csikszentmihalyi's theory, by the way, is that people do not actually get much satisfaction from owning cars and houses and making big incomes, but really what they get the most satisfaction from is flow experiences in which they're engaged. So with flow, you have a sense of being removed from your everyday stress or surroundings for a time. You get a feeling of accomplishment. You develop new coping and doing skills and enhance creativity. In addition, it's good for our brain. Who knew? So this is from a study cited by Psychology Today, where it was shown that when you're in flow, your brain waves slow down, enhancing your creativity. Your dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, which is where your inner critic, the one that reviews you, lives, goes quiet. And neurochemicals are released, which amp up focus, boost imagination, and promote linked and lateral thinking. So it gives you more expanse to your thought process than you might have otherwise. And a study from Harvard also showed that increased creativity continued after the flow experience. So it's not just a matter of setting aside the time and having the experience. The next day, people were showing signs of increased creativity. Just want to make my screen bigger because I noticed you can see all the clutter on my desktop. So how do we achieve flow? Like you may say, boy, this is really great. I really want to have a lot of flow experiences, but how do you do that? The Flow Institute, which offers many courses in flow, by the way, also has some wonderful handouts and also a blog. And this is their lovely handout on how to achieve flow with three steps, really, 3 points. So one is your mindset, to be curious and prioritize the quality of your experience. So you're entering an experience, whatever it may be, and basically you're focused on the experience. You're wondering how it's going to be. You're, as Carlos was talking about, you're in the moment and you're prioritizing what you're experiencing in that moment. Your preparation for that moment is to clear your mind, activate your body, and focus. And I do personally think most flow experiences do involve activity, do involve doing. Csikszentmihalyi says people can also enter flow by reading, by watching a movie, but I tend to like the emphasis on the doing parts. And immersion is important. You become absorbed into the act. You let it happen rather than make it happen. So again, even though you're doing preparation, you suspend your expectations for what it's going to be like, and you just experience it as it happens. Where will you find flow? Well, Csikszentmihalyi feels you'll find it everywhere, and apparently, according to our survey, you will. So he suggests you can find it in physical activity, in memory, in bringing up your cherished memories, in reading, in science, scientific inquiry, in your relationships, having conversations with people, having doing someone was talking about being on the beach with family, doing activities with your family, in creativity, in play, and in work. So there are many ways to use flow, and today I'm going to focus on two of them in particular. One of them is taking a break from stress and using flow to rejuvenate. So basically calling on your resilience through setting up experiences that may lead you to flow. The other thing I realized, and if you've heard me speak at all before about flow, you know that really that was my focus at that point. But the other thing I recently realized is that there are opportunities to dive into what is stressful or into the hard work you're doing and seek flow experiences in that to enrich that experience. And so it may be the work you're doing, it may be caring for a child, it may be caregiving for an adult relative or friend. It could be you lose your job, you're trying to do a job search for another one. It could be that kind of thing. And I'll talk about that in a minute and give you examples of both. So starting with taking a break with flow, I just want to stress that no matter what you're engaged in, whether it's a caregiving process, whether it's a grief process, whether it's anticipatory grief, it's okay to try to take a break from that, a mental break from that, a physical break from that if you can. But sometimes we feel like it's not okay. It's selfish. It's not what you should be doing, but you need those breaks to rejuvenate and to call on your resilience so you can keep doing the work or keep doing the grieving work or whatever it is you're engaged in. So there are some ways you can take a break with using flow. And I would start by thinking about what is your passion? Do you like to play an instrument? Do you like to draw? Do you like to ride horses? What do you like to do? Or what have you always wanted to try? I know there's somebody out there who wants to try like jumping out of a plane with a parachute, and I'm sure you can achieve flow with that too. What do you want to learn to do better? What is some skill that perhaps you tried and you'd like to learn more about? Maybe you'd like to learn more about Italian cooking. Maybe you'd like to learn how to bake bread better or different kinds of bread. Maybe you'd like to learn a different knitting style. I think it's important that no matter what you do, that you engage actively, that you do something. I think sometimes when we're under stress and we think about taking a break, I think about a couple of things. One of them is binge watching Netflix, which I I don't think is a flow activity. Binge watching sitcoms or episodic television on Netflix, somehow I don't think qualifies. And this is my judgment based on the fact that at the end of doing that, I don't really feel better than I did when I started. Whereas I think engaging in a flow activity does make you feel better at the end than when you started. You know, my other passive activity is window shopping on eBay. I don't feel much better after an hour of that either. But if you choose something that actually at the end of it, you can feel like you've accomplished something, I think that makes a huge difference in how you feel going forward. So choose a level or project that's challenging, but not frustrating. So it might not be something that you do every day. It might be something that's just a little bit different, a level up, that where you feel like you're learning new things and where you really have to stay focused in order to keep up or to participate. Set aside uninterrupted time, even just an hour, and plan for success. You can engage in a structured activity. You can, especially now, there's so much online that if there was something that you wanted to try to learn to do, there's a lot of 1-hour classes that you can be a part of where, you know, basically there's a beginning, there's an end, there's a structure, and it's there for you whenever it's convenient for you. And think about whether it's something you can do alone, or would you rather interact with others, like your partner or a team if it's safe to do so. We are in COVID times, or an instructor. Because some people, you know, can go on look at a YouTube video and teach themselves to do something new. And some people really need to interact with an instructor or have somebody with them showing them. You know, I'm a very active crocheter. And I learned to crochet a long time ago, but I can tell you that I could not pick it up from books. We didn't have YouTube in those days. I'm sorry to say, but the only way I could learn was when my 9-year-old niece sat me down and said, "Here, Aunt Kathy, we're going to learn how to do this." So, you know, look for your instructors everywhere. So I've made a list of a few suggestions for things you might want to try if you're looking for particular flow activities in particular areas. So one of the popular ones is art activities or creative activities. So drawing, painting, or trying a new medium. Watercolors if you're used to acrylics or vice versa. Learn to knit or crochet or learn a new stitch. Learn beading or stained glass, both of which are obviously require a lot of concentration. Take a singing or instrument lesson, or engage in a baking or cooking class. And during the early days of the pandemic, when I was really, I was not handling pandemic real very well, being at home all the time. I have to say that I took crochet classes online that really changed my life, changed my outlook, just from the fact that I was sitting and concentrating on something else for an hour that just was completely different. And in a couple of slides, I'll show you something else I engaged in. I also had always wanted to learn to draw and never really felt that I could draw. And I took a drawing class for an hour. And I don't know that I can draw any better than I could in the beginning, but it was challenging. I focused on it, and I do feel really happy that I did that and just have that foundation. So here's some suggestions for engaging in movement activities. You could plan and take a bike ride on a new route with a friend. Take a hike on a new trail. Go skiing and work on your technique. Engage in a yoga class. There are plenty of those online. Practice Tai Chi. And I added learn tennis. I don't know, again, where we are COVID-wise in terms of whether it's okay to be outside across a tennis net with a partner, but tennis comes up a lot in the flow literature. And I think it's because of tennis being one of those activities that you basically have to concentrate so much to be ready for the ball coming your way the next time and where it's going to be and watching your opponent's moves and trying to figure out what they're thinking. I think it's hard not to be engaged when you're playing tennis if you want to do it safely and productively.
Could I add something, Kathy, about tennis?
Of course.
I was a former tennis player, and it was the focus on the ball. It's the repetitive ball movement that you have to focus on. I think that really gets you into the flow. You have to focus on the ball.
Oh, that's great. That's interesting. Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. And then I have a few suggestions for engaging ongoing projects. Some people like to plan and plant a garden, which of course provides you with lots of flow activities because you have the planning, you have the planting, you have the weeding, you have the, all of those maintenance activities are involved in gardening. You could build a piece of furniture, not from a kit, but, getting plans and you could build it from a kit, but I'm thinking getting plans and getting the supplies and just figuring all the pieces out. Or you could learn a new language with others, for example. Again, that's something you could do online. So I will, if I did not lose my slide, I'll tell you briefly about my flow art experience, which I'm sharing because it was a really accessible experience. I think it was the London Drawing Group online offered a class of making cutouts like Matisse did. I don't know if you're aware of Matisse's story, but Matisse, of course, being a famous painter, at the end of his life, he was disabled and he couldn't leave his chair. And so he could no longer get up and paint. And so one of the things that he would do is that he would make cutouts of figures, basically using scissors and pieces of paper and his imagination. And there's footage of this online that's really amazing to watch. He would just take the scissors, take the paper, and cut out shapes that would turn out to be things because he could envision that that's what that was going to happen. He had assistants helping him with that and putting them up around the room to make different collages, and he would have them move them around. And so I took this class online, which was about trying to make cutouts like Matisse. So pretty simple, basically, because I don't think of myself as an artist. You needed colored paper, you needed scissors. It was an hour-long class. The instructor would say, here's the shape we're cutting, get your scissors and cut. Anything you came up with was fine. It was only really for you. You could share if you wanted, and then you could arrange them any way you wanted. So that was my initial arrangement, and I liked it so much I haven't changed it. But it was just such an amazing experience. I did it on a day when I was having a really bad day, and I just said, I'm going to sit here and do this. And I did this very simple thing. And at the end of the hour, it was only an hour, I looked up and thought, okay, that was flow. That was me sitting there concentrating on every instruction that came across, trying really hard to do the activity, having never tried that before, trying to make what I was cutting look like the shape that was on screen. And I was really pleased with what happened. So I just share that to say that it doesn't have to be a complicated thing. It doesn't have to be a complicated experience trying to do something that gets you into flow. Again, it's the preparation, it's the concentration, it's the, trying to exercise your skills. So the next part that I want to talk about is the trying to use flow in your challenges, finding flow in your challenges. And I'll show you shortly a screen that was what I found that really inspired me about this was a motherhood forum where they were talking about how child rearing provides you with lots of flow opportunities. And if you have a child, I invite you to think about those opportunities. I was thinking about when my child was little and we would go to a park together, and basically your entire focus was on what's that child doing? How am I going to keep that child safe? And managing, until he was old enough to do it well himself, just, sitting back, but managing like how he was interacting with other people. Is he roaming too far? Is he safe? What is he going to do next? Oh, he wants me to go on that slide with him. That's a challenge. Or swing with him. That's a challenge. But it was so much about being in the moment. And that was obviously a flow experience. So I was thinking about those things, and also thinking about, caregiving, and how there are so many things we do when we're caregiving that actually can be conducive to flow experiences. There's also, if you're looking for a new job, if suddenly you need to find a new job, I think there are ways that you can turn that into a flow experience, whether that be, just trying to explore things and figure out if there's some other field you want to be in, or some other career you want to have. If you need to relocate, doing research, either visiting or somehow interacting and finding a new place to live, thinking about new apartments, new houses, decorating, that kind of thing. And completing tasks at work. I work, I guess, in the financial end of things at an independent school. And I never thought of myself as a spreadsheet person, but I can tell you that if I am confronted with a challenge, like, why did we overspend that category? What happened there? Or what's going to happen next year? What do you project is going to happen next year there? That I can get lost in a spreadsheet, in setting up the problem and in trying to find the best way to use the spreadsheet to solve my question, in refining the question and doing analysis, such that it's really it's very rewarding to me, which I would not have predicted. so I'm not a financial person by nature. So I think I'm living proof that Excel can give you flow, surprisingly. So again, flow at work, the things that bring you flow, the Excel spreadsheet is second. Learn to create a PowerPoint. Putting this together last night. Yes, last night. I was going, I was just engaged for hours and finally went, I need to go to bed. But, certainly that was a challenging activity, lots of things to think about. Didn't eat dinner. Yes. So, even something like that, which is just, a little bit challenging for me, can be really the basis for a flow activity. You could learn advanced skills in your area of expertise, or work with others to find a cooperative solution to a challenge. Again, that's the relationship piece that Csikszentmihalyi was talking about too. So flow in parenting, this is the piece I was talking about. And you can look at this, either later or I can just go through it really briefly. And I did give you a reference for all these resources at the end, so you can look them up yourself. But this article really talks about having, one-pointed focus, steady concentration, undivided attention, a sense of being outside everyday reality and rote mundane routines, merging of action and our awareness. If you parented, you know that, everyday and mundane are words that you aspire to, but that don't really happen. You have great inner clarity and a sense of personal control over the situation and action. You know what needs to be done and how well you're doing it, not based on other standards and guidelines, hopefully, again, the review piece, but rather on our own independent inner guidelines. You know the activity is doable and achievable, and that hopefully you know that your inner skills or resources are adequate to the task. You need to believe in yourself and your capabilities at that moment. And I think when you have achieved flow in parenting, you have a sense of serenity and equanimity. You feel secure, you feel proud and happy. You feel like you're growing beyond the boundaries, and you're not just reacting to things, you're being proactive about things. And hopefully your self-consciousness melts and you're not reviewing yourself, although that's hard to do when you're a parent, hard not to. There's a sense of timelessness. You're focused on the present. The hours seem to pass by in minutes. You're free from the past and the future. Your anxiety melts away. And intrinsic motivation is present. The act is the reward. You no longer seek outside forces, nor does anyone need to tell you to do it. You're inspired from within, and you act of your own accord. You choose the activity for its own sake. Now, I think that's the ideal of parenting. But I think it is achievable. I think about moments when my son, who's now 23, when, when I worked out like how to help him learn to feed himself when he was eating, how to, work with him on cooking projects, how to, how to let go and let him go play by himself. Think about kids riding bicycles too. I mean, something like the activity of teaching your child to ride a bicycle and your child learning to ride a bicycle. Think about that being like a dual flow activity, really. So there's just so many applications, I think, to flow. So obviously the parenting is caregiving, and I started thinking about flow in caregiving and how, in fact, I think people who have not engaged in caregiving think about caregiving as being stressful and drudgery and really hard, and it is those things. And I acknowledge there are many times when you're in a difficult situation where it's really difficult to achieve flow in caregiving. I was thinking about the kinds of things that might come up where flow might be part of the situation. And certainly, in a few minutes we can talk about things that you've experienced. But I was thinking about my mother, who I helped care for, and my friend who I helped care for, and what experiences with them seemed to be flow experiences. And I realized that when my mother was in assisted living, one of the activities that they would do with them routinely was doing hand massages and manicures. And really that's I can't imagine it wasn't challenging. My mother had dementia, but it is such a soothing activity, involves some challenge, involves focus, involves a sense of accomplishment for the person who's helping their caree through that process, or doing that with their caree. Solving a mobility or accessibility problem. Often there would be situations like with my mom where there would be walker and accessibility issues that it was just really pleasurable to sit down and try to think them through and try to figure out what the steps were and what was going on there. And with my friend who was losing basically physical abilities due to ALS, there were a lot of those. Like, how do I get a drink by myself? How do I take care of my personal needs by myself? How do I minimize the interaction I need from caregivers if they're not available at the moment? So that was very rewarding to me to do that. You can do cooking activities, which can engender flow and be rewarding. Sometimes working on a jigsaw puzzle or an art project. How many times have you started a jigsaw puzzle and then realized that it's been a long time that you've been sitting there trying to fit that piece in? And so that can really be a nice activity. And then preparing food and feeding. So I think I have a personal, I think the story that I think of when I think about flow and caregiving is a feeding story. And I've been in discussions before, maybe with some of you who are here, I can't remember where it was, about how feeding another adult is really a very sacred experience. And I thought about that in terms of flow, because when you're preparing to feed someone, basically you're doing all the preparation, right? You're figuring out what they're going to eat, what they like to eat, what implements you need, how to do it with minimal mess, how to do it with dignity for the person you're feeding, how to make it an enjoyable experience for both of you. So then you're sitting down with them, hopefully eye to eye, face to face. And you have that interaction with them as well, the relationship flow with them. I always found when I was feeding someone that it was the best time to have a conversation, in between bites, of course, but you were sitting there looking at each other, and it's a great opportunity to talk. And also, for me, feeding someone was trying to normalize the experience as much as possible, trying to make the only thing that was different about that experience for the person whom I was feeding to be the fact that I was manipulating the implements rather than them. So you want to have conversation, you want it to be a normalizing experience. And then there's just really concentrating on the pacing, on making sure you're giving them food fast enough, making sure you're not giving them food too fast. I never wanted the person to have to ask for more food, so I wanted to be perceptive to that. At the same time, one of the concerns of people who have to be fed by someone else is being fed too fast, choking, having too large bites put in your mouth, being hit in the teeth with a spoon, all things like that. So just being really focused in the moment and concentrating on that, and just, really trying to do a really good and enjoyable job with it, and feeling good about that afterwards if it all went well. And I have to say that, for me, feeding someone and caregiving was just an incredibly rewarding experience. And I think it's because, and I didn't even realize till recently, it's because of that flow. It's because of that flow experience. So I'll leave you with a quote, of course, by Csikszentmihalyi, words to flow by. He says, "The best moments in our lives are not the passive, receptive, relaxing times. The best moments usually occur if a person's body or mind is stretched to its limits in a voluntary effort to accomplish something difficult and worthwhile." And I've also, as I said, just given you all the references for things that I've talked about, so that if you want to find out more information, Csikszentmihalyi has some TED Talks. And there's also a few other TED Talks by other people about flow and how it impacted their lives, which are really interesting. And my contact information is here if you should want to get in touch. And I think that's it. So I'm really interested in hearing if other people have ideas about flow, reactions about anything I said, any flow experiences that they want to share, or questions to talk about.
And I also want to mention that we are going to archive the recordings and include a copy of the PowerPoint. And I'll email everyone next week with that link to the archives, which will include the copy of the PowerPoints. Something I wanted to add, we have talked about nourishment during our healing presentations and also during our different training programs. And I think that flow during the feeding is why it's so hard at end of life when someone can no longer take that nourishment. It feels like a failure on our part. It's devastating. And to have that insight that it's just the body doing what's needed to stay comfortable at end of life can be so helpful. It's not that we're not providing the right food or delivering the food in the right way. It's just end of life comfort for that person.
Denise, I was thinking about flow, about other flow experiences in caregiving, and I was thinking about when, excuse me a second, I was spending with my brother, like our last 8 hours with my mother when she was dying, and she'd had a stroke and she wasn't taking nourishment, and that was so difficult that we couldn't give her food. But I have to say, I do think there was something flow-like about that experience of being with her for those last 8 hours and taking care of her as best we could, during that time. So it's interesting the way it pops up everywhere.
I'm going to push back a little bit on Netflix, although you can tell me if my interpretation of this is correct. Okay. I had a challenge last year. I was targeted for harassment, and it lasted for about 6 months. And I was not able to really talk about it except privately with a few people and with an attorney that I had to hire, who was just a delightful person, an amazing advocate, and so concerned for me that she added me to her prayer list. That's how intense the situation was. So publicly, I was out presenting this, everything is good. Privately, it was a very lonely, upsetting experience. And part of what helped me was watching two particular shows. The first one was Schitt's Creek. The first season was okay, but once I got into the second season, particularly the last episode of the second season, I remember feeling a belief in the world again, that I had lost because of this particular extended experience. And I felt connected to a love source that was so comforting to me. And I would go back and watch that particular episode on a regular basis whenever I felt that disconnect of a love source. And I got into a flow, I really believe, in watching that. I didn't think about time. I just enjoyed the music and the script and the story. And the other one that helped me was Anne with an E on Netflix as well. I had looked at it and I thought, oh, I don't think so. And then my parents were like, I think you would like that. And I started watching it. And again, it was connecting to a love source because they talk about family in a way where family is possible at any stage of life with anyone. And it just made me feel like all is possible when you have love in your life, and anybody at any time can receive that love. And again, it was being disconnected in a way from a love source. And those stories reconnected me in a way that I felt helpful. So how do you feel about that as being flow?
I think I was probably too judgy, and
It's okay. It's okay.
I think I see your point. I see your point. You know, clearly you had a flow experience, and so I think that's great. Maybe I'm just thinking about my experience, because also I tend to watch Netflix while I'm doing other things, and so I'm not really concentrating on that story. Or I hear you describe the music, the story, the script, and you're clearly focused on that and concentrating on it. So that's really great, and I'm glad that you brought that up and that works for you. And I love those shows too.
Jessica's in the chat room also cheering on Schitt's Creek. I also am someone who really enjoys stories. And at that particular time in my life, to be able to sit with a book just was not possible. I didn't have the energy to receive the words, but I could receive the vision of the story. And that's why it replaced a book for me. I received a story in a way that was easy for me in those particular moments. I actually did that too during a time in caring for my parents where they both were critically ill at the same time. I was working lots of different jobs. I didn't have a lot of energy. And at the end of the day, I honestly would go to Law and Order Special Victims Unit. And it was because there was a beginning and an ending. And I needed an ending. I needed to know that the good guys won and the bad guys go to jail. Because I was looking for the good guys during this particular caregiving experience. So it helped me reconnect to the idea that we can win. It can work out.
I get that. And I will say that Csikszentmihalyi does say he thinks if you interact with television in a particular way, that it can be flow. So.
And I've been admiring your pronunciation of the author, and so appreciate that. Kudos to you. I've been clapping for you every time you say it.
It only took years, so it's good.
Doesn't matter. Got in the flow.
Right.
Got in the flow in terms of pronunciation. Anybody else have any last questions for us? Please feel free to type them in the chat room. And I will tell you, Kathy, what I wrote down was my pattern of happiness. When I think about flow now, I'm going to look for it in terms of creating that pattern of happiness. So I will ask you, Kathy, what is your pattern of happiness as it relates to flow?
I think my pattern of happiness, what makes me happy over and over, is learning new things. And that probably doesn't surprise you, Denise, because every time we talk, I say, I'm taking this class, I'm taking that class, I'm learning this, I'm learning that. I think that's really what drives me and makes me happy.
And it is a huge benefit to me because I benefit from what you learn. So for instance, Kathy and I co-facilitate a grief support group twice a month, and Kathy will interject new support mechanisms in our group, which is so helpful. And then I benefit from it. So I love it. I love your love of learning.
We are a good team.
Okay, I think everybody is good. So keep us posted on your flow as you think about it for the rest of our time together. Please feel free to share in the chat what comes to mind about what gives you flow. And Kathy, thank you so much. Always helpful.
Thank you, Denise. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, we're going to take another 10-minute break, and then Bruce is going to start us off at top of the hour. Thanks, everyone. See you in 10 minutes.